Welcome to Mosaic Making 101. If you purchased an Overflow retreat box for our virtual women's retreat, you will find all the supplies that you need inside to make your very own Mosaic coaster. Follow along with myself and Mike, who is the world's best hand model, to learn how to make your very own coaster. Now, this project will take you 2 to 3 days to complete, so be sure that you set aside enough time to be able to work on it. And stay tuned to the end to make sure that you know all of the steps that you'll need to follow and to hear a little bit about what Mike and I struggled with along the way. In your bag, you'll find a terracotta saucer, mosaic tiles, adhesive Thinset to glue your tiles, grout for after your tiles are set, gloves for mixing your grout and Thinset, a sponge to clean up your grout, and a mask just in case for when you are mixing your grout and Thinset. Your at-home supplies will be a bowl full of water, a pair of scissors, a spoon or tablespoon, and a washcloth or paper towels. Day 1, all you will be doing is soaking your terracotta saucer in water for at least an hour, but ideally overnight. For day 2, we will be gluing our tiles to our terracotta coaster with Thinset. To start, grab a washcloth or paper towel and dampen it. You will then set your terracotta pot that has been soaking on top of the paper towel so that it doesn't dry out while you are gluing. Placing your tiles before mixing your Thinset will allow you to get a sense of the pattern you hope to have on your finished mosaic. Next, you will take your adhesive Thinset and begin to mix it with water. Take your bag of Thinset and a tablespoon of water, pour it in, seal the bag, and then mix. You'll want your Thinset to be like a thick toothpaste-like consistency. Once your Thinset has slacked, you are going to close up your baggie and then mix it up a little bit more. And then you'll start to move all of your Thinset to one of the bottom corners of your bag. And then you are going to treat it like a pastry bag. You will cut the tip off of the end. And then you will take a piece from your terracotta pot, apply Thinset to the back and then place it down. Continue applying until all of your pieces have been adhered. It's okay if some of your Thinset squishes out because it will be covered up with grout once it has set. You could also follow Mike's method of just pouring your Thinset out and then placing your tiles on top. It's a little messier, so you do you. Once you're happy with the way that you've set your tiles, it's now time to wrap them up on a damp cloth and let them cure overnight. If you followed Mike's method, you might not even need to grout at all. You can see that him putting a bunch of Thinset down and then squishing his tiles allowed him to already kind of pre-grout. And so if you went with this method and prefer the gray, then you're done. As you can see, the Thinset is now fully set and it is now time to apply grout. Before you mix up your grout, make sure you put your saucer on a damp washcloth or paper towel. Grab a tablespoon of water and pour it into your bag. Seal the bag and mix. You'll likely need to add a bit more water. Once mixed, you're gonna let the grout sit for 5 minutes to slake, which is gonna allow all the water to absorb into the powder. After you've allowed your grout to slake, mix it back up. Knead the grout down to the bottom of the bag, and then take your scissors and cut off the end of the bag. Next, squeeze it out in between the tiles, and don't really worry about getting it on top of the tiles because we're gonna use our sponge to clean up the whole area. It's like toothpaste. Make sure you're pushing it down in between all of the cracks. Once you've got all of your grout incorporated between the cracks, start smoothing it out and cleaning it up with your hands. Scrape off any excess grout that you have on the sides and try to smooth out the top as best as you can, but we're gonna let it set for a while so that it can harden a bit because right now the grout is too wet to be able to clean it up. Take your sponge and wet it, and if you've got any grout on the side of your coaster that you wanna clean up, start wiping that down so that it doesn't dry and harden on the outside. Use your sponge to clean up the edges on the inside of your coaster. Be sure to rinse in between. After a few minutes to let it just briefly harden up, you're gonna take your sponge, wring it out really well, and start cleaning up your larger tiles. Be sure to use a very light touch with your sponge as the grout around the tiles is still very wet. As you clean it up, watch your mosaic come to life. As you clean it up, you're gonna still see some of these streaks down on your tiles. You're going to need to let your grout dry a little bit and haze over before you can come back in and do your final cleanup. Let sit for about 15 to 20 minutes to harden up a bit. You can see that after about 20-25 minutes, it has hazed over, although it is still a little damp. I'm gonna go in and clean up the tiles a little more before putting it in a bag to cure. Going in lightly to clean up those tiles. And clean up whatever you don't want left on the edge. I'm pretty happy with that overall. I may come back in about 20 to 30 minutes to do one last pass over with the sponge, but I'm really pretty happy with it. So I'm going to put it in a plastic bag and let it cure overnight, and I'm gonna make sure not to touch it or put anything on it until it is fully dry. We'll see you in 24 hours. So a few things that we learned from the mosaic making process. The first one was that the craft cabin where we made these was a little more humid than what we were anticipating. And so I had set the mosaic down on a wet washcloth and had put it in a bag to cure overnight. Well, I came back after 2 days and it was still soaking wet. So I took it out and brought it back into the office where it's a little bit drier, and it then set overnight. So you may, depending on the humidity in your house, not need to have your coaster sit in the bag or on a wet cloth as much. I also had my terracotta soaking for like a week and a half, which I would not recommend because it really oversaturated the ceramic, or not ceramic, the pot. As well as when you are mosaicing, a lot of my tiles are pretty far apart. And so I got a little bit of cracking on my grout because I had to use so much grout. So when you're making your pattern, I would suggest adding more tiles and putting them closer together, so then you're filling much smaller cracks. Overall though, it turned out pretty great and I had lots of fun making it, and really Mike made most of it, and we hope that you have just as much of a fun time making your own mosaic coaster. And look, so fun.